Okay, we are back with our Facebook Live series. Some exciting news. We're going to finish off this year by kicking off a 3-week series pertaining to all things profitability.
Yeah, seems
Fun
like
topics.
a fitting time to talk about it.
Right, yeah. Especially now farmers are out making decisions,
Yeah,
planning, lots of planning.
Deciding and,
Mm-hmm.
and pencil pushing and things like that going on right now before the Christmas holidays. You know, one of
Right.
those times we always think about money, and farmers are definitely thinking about next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll just give you a quick rundown on what this will be. Week 1, it'll be all things fertility. Week 2 is seed and cropping rotation. And week 3 will be land, machinery, and living. So tune on in
Hopefully
at
we can
this
give
time
some,
for the next 3 weeks, and we'll be here talking numbers.
give some good advice and you know, at least give some ideas for people to
Mm-hmm.
think about different things that they can work on, maybe cutting a little bit of cost.
Right. Yeah, good stuff. Well, let's kick it off with fertility.
Sure.
What do you got for us today?
Well, you know, I've had some questions around fertility. You know, it's one of those things. A lot of guys are like, okay, can I cut back on? Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
anything is within reason to cut back when it comes to, I wanted to mention, doing a budget. Is one of the most important things. Pushing the pencil and actually looking at the numbers. But when you start doing that, then you start looking at every category. And where you can potentially cut back. And fertility is one of those things that you got to remember is directly tied to yield. Can be directly tied to yield. The last couple of weeks we've talked about some fertility topics and so forth, and soil sampling, which is critically important. And I think starting off by just saying, hopefully you guys have taken a recent soil sample.
Mm-hmm.
If you have, you're probably in a better situation than others, because that is a cost, but you can spread it out over a few years. But having a recent soil sample is crucial, especially when you want to make some of these decisions about where you can maybe cut back a little bit on fertility. The other thing I wanted to mention up front was the different approaches when it comes to fertilizing your soil.
Mm-hmm.
Most people in Iowa and throughout the Midwest focus on a kind of build up and maintain approach. And really what that is it's fertilizing the soil. So you're fertilizing the soil, you're putting down enough to cover crop removal from that 240 bushel corn crop that you just took out. You're recovering and making sure you stay ahead, versus what they call the sufficiency approach, which is actually more of an approach to feed the plant and what it needs for that season. So the sufficiency approach kind of gives you more of an idea of profitability. Mm-hmm. You're feeding the plant what it needs to be the most economic return for that season.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that do it that way, and it may be time to maybe think in some certain circumstances, as I'll mention here a few times probably, if you're renting a piece of ground or something, there's not a guarantee that you have it next year. It may be, a field that you want to look at doing a different kind of approach on for fertilizing.
So let's talk about the differences between those. So let's start with the sufficiency approach.
Sure. So to try and put it into perspective, the sufficiency approach, basically, most guys know what the critical level is. Mm-hmm. So the critical level is the point at which below that you're going to see yield loss. And above that, you may see a response from fertilizer, but it's not always there. So the sufficiency approach would stop applying fertilizer at that critical level. If you get it up to the critical level, at that point you're not guaranteed a return on that investment to put more fertilizer out.
It's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Where it can start decreasing.
Yeah, versus the build and maintain, which the build and maintain obviously is fertilizing the same area that the sufficiency approach is, but then above that critical level, there's also an area that's known as the maintenance level in between that. So there's another line, and above that line, basically you get in that high and very high range. Then you stop applying so much fertilizer. So basically the build and maintain applies fertilizer for a higher range. You're building that soil.
So and we can zoom up on this too and look at the graph here.
Yeah, so this is just a really good illustration too that shows you. I kind of highlighted that line there. That's the critical level right there, and you can see this deficiency correction line. That would be your sufficiency. So that's where you stop applying. For like phosphorus, you're going to be at like 15 parts per million. And potassium, that line would be like around 100, depending on your CEC and so forth. So above that, you wouldn't apply any. Versus the maintenance and build approach, you're still going to be applying up until that maintenance line a little bit further.
Okay.
So you're putting fertilizer on to get the soil level. Like I said, you're building the soil to keep it ahead. And then for guys that own their farms and so forth, that's great. You know, I don't have an issue with that. You know.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you're renting or something, it may be time to tweak that line a little bit.
Think about short-term
understand
versus
where
long-term.
your return is. Yeah. Rather than just keep putting on more fertilizer.
Okay, good stuff. So obviously scenario based. Whatever position you find yourself in.
Very scenario based.
For the next year,
we do everything.
Yeah.
When it comes to seed, we do everything on a field by field basis, and this is no different. You know, just like you're budgeting, you should be looking at each field separately to decide where those lines are that can be.
Okay, sounds good. And you can help with those types of decisions too.
Yeah, I'd be happy to help talk people through it as well.
Yeah,
So.
well, good stuff. All right, well, next on the list, we've got Npk and Micros.
Yep. I'll back up just a little bit.
Back
on
up
you
a little
there.
bit. I'm catching up.
That's okay.
Jumping ahead a little bit.
I get the question a lot about lime. So lime is a huge part of fertility, and ultimately, to me, lime is the part that, if you've ever seen those graphs, that's what decides how much of that nutrient's available in the soil. So you know, if you get too low a pH, phosphorus and some of those are not near as available to the plant. Lime is also a big factor in the growth of the plant too. And then this is another scenario-based thing that I want to throw out there for guys. Lime is usually more of a long-term investment. Not, I wouldn't say long-term, but one of those in between. It's not a short-term investment, but if you're renting a farm, it may be a thing where you're not willing to put the money out for it.
Right.
And you know, so say you're renting a farm, and it's got a pH of 5.5, where you're getting down there. That may be an area where you're like, okay, if the landlord's not willing to help out a little bit, and I've only got 1 or 2 more guaranteed year on this farm, then maybe you hold off on that and plant something like corn.
Right.
That's the idea. You got to remember that soybeans are going to take more of a hit than a grass crop like corn at a low pH, because that big bacteria that gives them the nitrogen is not going to work much below a 5.8. It really starts to struggle. And other nutrients are not as available. So I just want to hit that before we get into N, P, and K, because the lime is very important to the availability of your other nutrients. If you own the farm and you've got some lower pHs, you're planning on putting soybeans out there, it's worthwhile. This is a great one to variable rate apply to. If you've got soil samples on a grid basis, you're going to pay a little extra charge for the co-op to do that, but this is one you could save money on. And this is one you don't need to over apply. Right. You don't need to have a pH of 8. You just you want to get it up to that 6.5 region. So. Okay.
So when you talked medium term per se versus our short term and long term, would you say 5 years, 4 or 5 years? How far out can you?
Yeah, typically guys go 4 to 5 years. A soil test you want to do at least every 3 to 4 years. And that's when guys typically think about applying lime again.
Right.
So it just depends on your soil types, how well they buffer. If you're putting on anhydrous ammonia, some things that will lower the pH faster. Some of those fertilizers. If you've been doing corn on corn continuously and putting on anhydrous ammonia, you're going to have lower pHs. So, a lot of things factor into that.
Okay.
But yeah.
Good stuff. All right, next now, NP and K.
NP and K. So the big three, I guess, that when it comes to NP and K, obviously, we just talked all about how the two approaches, meet, the rubber meets the road there. So guys can kind of make a decision on how they want to do that. But I would say, the best way to do it is to compromise a little bit, maybe aim for that sufficiency approach, back it down a little bit, look at your levels on a field-by-field basis, see where you're at, and see how bad it is. If they're all pretty close, they're pretty good, they're pretty close to that critical line or above, then you can probably cut back your normal routine of, yearly routine. The other thing I'd mention, especially on P and K, is, maybe consider putting them closer to, the thing when it comes to nutrients is you want the best use efficiency out of them too. So putting them as close as you can to when the crop needs it. So just like with nitrogen, putting it on maybe in the spring, working it in, making sure it doesn't run off, over the winter, those kind of things, or putting it on before corn. A lot of guys already do that, but maybe putting your supply of nutrients on before corn versus soybeans or something. So, both of them require high amounts of both. Soybeans require a lot of potassium, but you also don't want to be short potassium on corn. That contributes to weak stalks and roots at the end of the season, things you don't want to have issues with. So both of those are extremely important. The nitrogen side of things, guys, I didn't mention this in the beginning, but guys know, bulk, buying in bulk and making sure they get those early order discounts, which are most of them are coming up now, and then the early 2018 season. So getting those discounts, anything they can on that side, making sure you use, the cheapest form that you can use in your operation. Like I said, anhydrous ammonia, trying to side dress it if you can. If you side dress, you're not going to need, a nitrification inhibitor. If you put it on early spring, then you probably should have something. So those are, you can cut some costs there too. So putting it on in season when it's going to use it, you're not going to lose it. You have that, that benefit of still, you guys don't think about that, but a lot of that gets lost too in the soil. So you want to use every penny of that you put out. So the other thing I want to mention too is, I work a lot with precision ag. That's part of my job.
Yep.
I did pull in a yield map here, just one of our fields, and you guys know what a yield map looks like. You have green areas for the good spots and then red areas for the poorer spots. Nitrogen is one of those things that you can really use your data layers to your advantage. You can variable rate apply nitrogen and save some money, and P and K. But you really need to look at those numbers harder for P and K. Nitrogen is one that's going to give you a better return on it. Some guys may not have yield. There's still things you can work with for nitrogen, because nitrogen is a mobile nutrient. So if you have a soils map and you get topography map, those things really influence where your soil is in the landscape, how nitrogen moves. Just like this map here, those red areas are low spots. So those are areas where probably wouldn't want to put a lot of nitrogen on for fear of losing most of it. So those kind of things you can easily, and if you have yield maps, add that layer in there too, and use that for variable rate applications. So just a really good way. If guys have the technology, don't be afraid to call us.
It's pretty amazing.
Talk to somebody and put it to use, because you can really gain a lot by using it. So
okay, good stuff. Very informative. Anything else? We chatted about the egg decision maker. I think you just mentioned it in the beginning, just to use a budget and make sure that
make sure people are using some kind of budget. I just printed off ours here at Iowa State, the local land grant institute. Pretty much all of them have a really great budgeting tool. Some form, whether you want to write it down or use it in Excel like this one is, but just put those numbers down there. If you need to use their cost of production estimates and stuff to help you out, then do that. But start getting those numbers down so that you can see, where you may be able to cut. And like I said, this should be a decision on a farm, field by field basis. As you go through each of your farms and fields.
Okay. Well, good stuff. Anything else for us today?
No, I think that pretty well covers it up. Hopefully gave them some tips and some ideas on where they can cut, or try to cut in fertility without sacrificing too much yield, because that's the name of the game. And
as always, feel free to submit questions to us, and we will answer them here live for you. So happy to help out. Thanks for tuning in, and have a good day.